When you picture the Dutch Golden Age, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Famous painters like Rembrandt and Vermeer, the Amsterdam canals and typical merchant houses, or less savory things like slavery and arms trade. Regardless, the 17th century was a profitable period for the Dutch. In this period, Amsterdam became the center of world trade. Ships sent by the Dutch East India and West India Company sailed the seas to trade, wage war, and enslave. Because most of the wealth the Dutch acquired in this period came from maritime expeditions, the country developed a distinct maritime culture. Traces of this culture can still be seen in Amsterdam today, for example at the Scheepvaartmuseum or the Palace on the Dam. In this documentary, we will focus on references to maritime culture that aren't as visible as the aforementioned examples, focusing instead on hidden references and symbolism that the average person would simply miss. This is Hidden References to Maritime Culture in Amsterdam, a documentary. First, we must ask ourselves, what does hidden mean? And how can we differentiate between the different ways something can be hidden? In order for something to classify as being hidden, it has to somehow be kept out of sight or concealed. This, however, can happen in various ways. We've decided to categorize the different ways something can be hidden in the following categories. 1. An artifact that's intentionally concealed or kept out of sight. 2. An artifact that unintentionally ended up being concealed. This could happen after a renovation where old details or decoration get hidden by newer ones. 3. An artifact that isn't hidden intentionally or unintentionally but ended up between an ocean of other details and objects. Think of the little man in the bottom right corner of a tympanum. 4. A detail or object that at first seems straightforward but has a hidden symbolic meaning.
Next to Waterlooplein we find a building called Het Ouderzijds Huiszittenhuis. While this building is currently used by the Dutch Academy of Architecture, in the 16th century this building was used by a charity foundation. The so-called huiszittenmeesters gave food and fuel to those who sat at home, meaning those who were unemployed. On the left side of the house, a memorial stone is placed that thanks the huiszittenmeesters for their charity. This memorial stone includes the Dutch lions, the 3 crosses, which are the symbol of Amsterdam, and 6 coats of arms of rich Amsterdam families, which helped finance the charity organization. Now you might think, a charity organization, what does that have to do with hidden references to maritime history? Well, on the tympanum at the back of the house, a very interesting cartouche is placed. It shows a painted boat on which 2 men stand. In between the men, a small dog can be seen. The flag of Amsterdam is displayed 2 times. It is placed on the back of the ship and carried by one of the men. It can initially seem pretty weird that this cartouche is placed on the back of the building instead of the front, where more people could see and enjoy it. In the 16th century, however, just behind Het Ouderzijds Huiszittenhuis was a garden complex which included the nearby depot. Here, in these gardens, the poor would receive their food and fuel directly from this depot. This meant that the cartouche was still being seen by many people. In the current day and age, however, this leads to the decoration being hidden. The way this artifact is hidden fits our second category. Due to a change in function, the cartouche is now unintentionally concealed. The cartouche is a reference to a legend which explains the founding of Amsterdam. In this legend, a bishop, a boy and a dog are shipwrecked at the mouth of a big river. The boy chooses to settle himself here as a fisherman. The bishop prophesies that once upon a time a famous city would arise in the spot where the boy built his fishing shack. This city came to be known as Amsterdam. It is interesting that the founding legend of Amsterdam involves one ship settling the city. A city that would later spawn thousands of ships and would come to be known as a center of maritime trading and warfare. While the inside of the cartouche is certainly interesting, the outside rim also contains 2 interesting details that reference maritime culture. Above and under the cartouche are 2 exaggerated fish heads. On the left and right side of the artifact 2 seashells can be seen. These 2 details can be seen on more buildings in Amsterdam that were built in the 16th century. At the address Kloveniersburgwal 29 we find Het Trippenhuis. This house, which was built by the famous Dutch architect Justus Vingboons, was commissioned by the brothers Louis and Hendrik Tripp. With this monumental house, which is rightfully classified as a civic palace, they wanted to impress their rival, Louis de Geer. Because of this, the decorations on this house that reference maritime culture aren't hidden in the traditional sense. They are displayed up front to impress and wow passers-by. The artifacts on this building could be placed in the aforementioned fourth category, as they all have a hidden symbolic meaning. The brothers Tripp paid for this house with the money they earned as arms dealers. They traded weapons via sea to both allies and enemies of the Dutch. This fact is referenced multiple times from the outside of the house. The chimneys on either side of the roof are sculpted to look like mortars, whereas 4 cannons and 2 piles of cannonballs can be seen within the tympanum of the house. The tympanum also contains the coat of arms which the brothers used. 3 small wooden shoes. Between the windows, the facade is decorated with fruit festoons and olive branches. The branches symbolize peace, a cynical notion for the arms dealer brothers. Under the window sills, seafood and a fish hat can be seen, a clear reference to maritime trade. And finally, on top of the pilasters, the typical acanthus leaf is replaced by palm trees, a reference to the Dutch colonies the brothers both supported and shipped weapons to.
Here we observe St. Nicholas holding in his hands a ship with sailors, traders, or travelers. St. Nicholas was seen as the patron saint of several professions, but for our purposes we're interested in his role as the patron saint of sailors, fishermen, ships, and sailing. These groups would often describe him as the Lord of the Sea, and in modern times he is described as the Christianized version of Poseidon. Many cities with large harbors adopted Nicholas as the patron saint of the city, one of them being Amsterdam. Symbolism can be found when looking at the sculpture. Observe how Nicholas isn't just holding the boat because he's forced to do so, he's holding it like a child. The facial expression almost corresponding to that of a young mother holding her baby. He is guiding his children over the seas, protecting them from the dangers of the open water. This artifact could be placed within our first and fourth category. The artifact is intentionally placed out of sight on the side of a building, and in order to understand the symbolic meaning of St. Nicholas, one must know beforehand who he is and what one is looking at. Along the Keizersgracht stands a merchant house that references maritime mythology. This house, which was built in 1689 by master carpenter Jan van Lier, shows 2 sea gods. The gods are carved in so-called scroll stones, which are placed on either side of the neck gable. On the left side, the Roman god Neptune is seen watering the fields. He is represented as a naked bearded man who is carrying with him many nautical elements. Examples of these are the anchor, which symbolizes support and safety. Also observe the fishnets with which he is draped. On the right side of the gable, the Greek god Poseidon is shown. Behind him sits a water wheel, which may be a reference to water wheels that were used in the Dutch colony of Suriname. A detail that both gods share are the water jugs they lean on. The water that flows out of these jugs symbolize respectively the rivers IJ and Amstel. These are the 2 rivers that flow through Amsterdam. It is interesting that this decoration is placed at this elevation on the facade of the house, where pedestrians had to look way up to see it. Wasn't the reason for decorations like this to show off your wealth? Then why was it placed so far out of view? Well, we can know for sure. Some of the reasons might be that the decoration was placed for a superstitious reason. Maybe the owner of the house thought that by honoring the gods of the sea, he would have safer voyages. In our opinion, however, the most likely reason is to simply spruce up a normally quite boring part of the building. Now, how is this hidden? Neptune and Poseidon could be described as hidden in our first category, as they are intentionally placed at a higher elevation, whereas the other decorations fit in the fourth category, as they harbor a symbolic meaning.
In conclusion, there are many examples of hidden references to maritime history in Amsterdam. In our short documentary, we believe that we've only been able to show you the tip of the iceberg, and that there are many more hidden artifacts to be discovered within the city.